Welcome to SBAM's daily briefing, the weekend edition. We're just our continuing effort to try to keep our members and small businesses all across the state informed about what's going on, what's happening in Washington, what's happening in Lansing, and even what's happening among other businesses throughout our state. We're constantly adding to our website the resources that are available to small businesses. So I just want to continue to try to do our best to keep you informed daily. I would remind you that the archives of each of our daily briefings is available on our website at sbam.org. And so we'll continue to sort of build this library of information as it happens. A lot going on in Washington. We've been reporting on it as we've gone along. And actually, Brian, we have a guest today. Why don't I flip it to you and let you introduce our guest and take this next segment.
Very good. Well, thanks, Rob. And yeah, we are live here in the weekend edition, and in the what we're trying to accomplish here is keeping up to date and not expecting you to wait till Monday to get information. So we have invited Congressman Huizenga to come on and talk a little bit about the federal response, especially what's going to be happening over the course of hopefully about the next week. A very robust federal response that we expect to happen. So we've talked a lot about what's already happened, what already passed last week. And with that, actually, one more thing. Let me just say that Congressman Huizenga, somebody I've been following for a long time, ever since we served in the legislature together, somebody I really have always looked up to in the way he handled himself in such a partisan time, and in a way kind of harkens back to the old days when people treated each other right. So Congressman Huizenga, thank you so much for being here on our show.
Well, hey, I appreciate it, Brian. Likewise, with you, I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, and Rob and I have known each other for quite a while as well. And as a small business owner myself here in Michigan, I appreciate you doing this, communicating with your members. For those of you that aren't aware, when I graduated with my oh-so-employable political science degree back in the day, I went into real estate and developing full-time. My family's been in construction. I now own our third generation sand and gravel operation in West Michigan. Still continue to do some real estate development. I've got a condo project I'm working on right now, and with 5 kids trying to cash flow college. I am very much concerned about what's happening in the economy and what this means for small business, because we know that this is the engine that really drives so much of our economy, not just in Michigan, but across the nation. So yeah, there is a lot happening in Washington. And Brian, Rob, I don't know if you want to start with a couple of questions, or you want me to just kind of give you a lay of the land of what we're hearing today.
Well, first of all, yeah, I mean, last week I gave a little bit of a recap of what we were expecting to happen next week. And in the numbers that we were talking about that time were like $850 billion to $1 trillion. And so I know that's the small business response, as that originally was, maybe 200 to 300 billion, but these numbers are growing, and just give us maybe a hint of what to expect. I know the Senate has kind of is a little further along in putting numbers out there. What can we expect?
Yeah, well, and what happened with that phase 2, the money that went into SNAP, the money that went into senior food programs, the other elements of what we had been talking about that came out of the House, that was really negotiated by Speaker Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin and the White House. This phase 3, is being negotiated in the Senate for the most part. We're having some input, trying to get input into our leader. But yes, and I'm not trying to be flippant about this, but half jokingly and only half jokingly, this is what happens when the House wants to spend $850 billion. The Senate wants to spend $1 trillion. So we compromise at $2 trillion. It's like most of the time things just get added. And now, having said that, and in all fairness, we have seen probably the size, scope, and understanding of the extent of this is really kind of coming home for some folks finally. And so we've seen that with what happened in the stock market this week, which, by the way, is our 401ks, our IRAs, those, especially if you're self-employed or you have a few employees, those are important benefits that are hard to give sometimes. And we are in a real spot here, not so much because of what happened in '08, where you had a house of cards built on malfeasance, bad information coming out of the housing industry that collapsed the system. We had a good, healthy, robust economic system and banking system that has had this voluntary shutdown imposed on it. And obviously markets hate uncertainty, and that's caused a lot of the tumble that happened this week. But there is a bipartisan effort, and frankly, by definition, it's going to have to be bipartisan coming out of the Senate. You have to have 60 votes to get anything out of the Senate. Mitch McConnell is bound and determined to move towards a Monday vote on this package. The package for small business specifically had been talked about at about $350 billion. That has grown to more like a $500 billion price tag for that part. There's discussion about direct payments into households. If you have an income of below $75,000, you would receive $1,200 a person, $2,400 for a married couple, and then for every $100 above that in income, that would be reduced by $5 up to about $99,000. But the point I have made to our leadership and whoever I can get to listen, which is when you've got so many small businesses being either sole proprietor, LLC, or a subchapter S corp, that means it flows through on our personal taxes, right? And
right.
My taxes might show $100,000 income or $120,000 income, but I had to buy a new oven for the pizza place, or maybe refurbish it and get new seating. Maybe I had to get a new piece of equipment, whatever it might be. And my take home isn't reflected in what is on my tax return. So I don't know that we're going to be able to get through with that. There's a tinge of class warfare that is happening out there.
Right.
I'm sure everybody's shocked about that. But for the most part, it's really been trying to keep everybody honest and informed, and for the most part, that is the case. And so we're attempting to try to tell the story of small business.
Well, even Bill, just even having a congressman understand pass-through income,
Right.
and the way that it can kind of artificially show income higher than what the actual cash flow into a household would be is reassuring. Let's talk a little bit about what passed last week. When we have when the new benefit for family medical leave passed for kids, for parents who have kids at home because the schools are closed down. Of course, and it's all schools. There's a reimbursement mechanism. Now, initially, we were pretty concerned about small businesses just managing the cash flow of making payroll this week and then filing on their quarterly taxes. Now we're starting to get some indication that maybe as soon as next week, the IRS is going to come out with guidance that allows for employers to keep the withholding taxes on their entire payroll and maybe file immediately for this rebate in order to cover the cash flow of paying for this benefit, which has pretty big implications on how layoffs are managed. So maybe could you give us a little bit of insight into what we can expect in that area?
Yeah, I wish I had a lot more information than what I do, but because this is really the rule coming out of the IRS. What I can tell you is that there's been a number of us advocating and pushing for that. In other words, no sense in sending money to Washington to have it sent back, right? Let's try to keep it in the coffers. And I was very pleased to see that the tax filing date has been moved back to July 15. I haven't had a clear answer as to what that means for quarterly payments. However, You know, if that means everything getting moved, that helps with cash flow. And I know for me as a seasonal business in construction, you know, we really have our last meaningful accounts receivable comes in about December. And by the time I get my April and May billing out, I'm not getting it till May or June. You know, this is tight for a lot of people on the cash flow front, and kind of getting back to what we're seeing in the marketplace. You know, this is not a collateral or a value proposition so much as it is a cash flow and liquidity issue. And I have a request for you all and for anybody who is listening. If you have examples of where your banks, credit unions, or anything are telling you, hey, we know you've had a line of credit before. We're not going to allow you to draw down on it, or we're not going to renew it, or any of those kinds of stories. We need to know that, not because we're trying to beat up on the banks, but because we're trying to show the regulators there's something called the TDR, and that has to do with basically loans that have been not had timely payments, and it could be a mortgage, it could be other loans. And what happens is that's not just a ding on the consumer, it becomes a ding on the bank as well. And a lot of our small community banks, suddenly what that means for them is they have to set aside additional capital to cover these TDR loans. And once a TDR loan, always a TDR loan, and no matter the circumstances. And what that means then is they have less capital to then lend to other people. So we're trying to go into this with the FDIC and some of the other regulators, trying to give them examples of what this means in the real world. So that would be a request that I would have of you all and your membership. But back to your question about the IRS. I think that is the right way to go. It allows those business owners to retain that cash. It basically becomes an instant tax rebate or a tax credit, right? And the functionality of that is keeping cash in, which then allows you to not have to be forced into a decision so immediately about what to do with your employees. And if there's a way of furloughing people, there's going to be some qualifications and some requirements for these potential bridge loans and those kinds of things that you use that money to maintain your employees, not to do not to do investment into your business or that kind of thing. This is really about employee retention. And if we can keep people off of the unemployment rolls, that's better not only for them and for us as small employers, but for society as well. And maybe we could talk a little bit about some of those businesses that are really on the front lines that are keeping our economy going. As I put it, you know, there's people out there working so that the rest of America can sit home. And I mean that flippantly. I mean, so we can let this kind of wash through. But that is our food producers, our food processors, our food delivery folks. The folks making sure that we've got electricity and heat and all those things, and not to mention obviously all of the healthcare professionals that are out there. But what I've proposed, and I've been told this has made it up to Mnuchin, Steve Mnuchin at least, is that I want to do something that I've dubbed the Patriot Bonus. All right, and what the Patriot Bonus would be, you've got employees that are wondering, you know, really, well, hey, all my friends or my family are all have been told not to come into work. Why do I have to come into work? Or they're a little concerned about what's happening with their exposure to COVID. And you want to reward these folks. If you could give a bonus and then as a reward to them, but then take a tax credit for that. I think that's a far better way than having direct dollars coming in from the federal government. You know, it's using our economic system in a way that rewards people who are coming making our economy continue to work at a very difficult time. And it can help those employers stay open. That we're starting to hear some reports of difficulty getting people to come into work because of various reasons, whether it is illness or just fear of illness. And we've got to be all pulling on the same rope in the same direction at this point. And I think for the most part, people are, but we've got to be innovative to make sure that.
Yeah, Congressman, I think one of the things we're hearing so much from our members right now is I'm fearful that the public health officials don't know enough about the economy to know how much of the Michigan economy actually feeds the solution or feeds, we make stuff in Michigan, and we make masks and ventilators, and we make food. And if you do a total shutdown, I don't think that they have a real sense, and I'm not sure the governor has a voice in her ear right now suggesting that there are real consequences to a total shutdown, to the very cause that we're trying, we're all trying to accomplish. So our fear is that we're going to overreact in that way. And we fully appreciate the public health issue that's going on here, but I'm afraid we worry about an economic disaster that will take way too long to come back from. So I just want to thank you really for joining us today. And I think one of the things we'll be asking you to help us with, the Department of Labor was actually given the ability to exempt under 50 employees who believe that, here's the language, if it would jeopardize the viability of their business as a going concern, to offer sick leave or family leave. We really are going to try to get the Department of Labor to give us some clarity on that very quickly, because we do believe we have some members right now who are teetering on the edge of viability. And so we may be back with you on that, and really appreciate you spending some time with us. I think you're going to stick around for the rest of this because you are, in fact, a business owner, a small business owner in Michigan. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Do this again, and you're right. Please give me those examples if there's anything that people are seeing in the banking industry. I sit on the Financial Services Committee, so very involved with those issues. And then likewise, as we can work with you, whether it's with the IRS or the Department of Labor for that clarification, we will do so. So thank you.
Super, thank you. And we have been working with the Bankers Association in Michigan on, like you said, trying to collect up some of the stories as we begin to hear them, or help them make the case that they need some regulatory relief. So, Brian, let's continue. We've Congressman talked a little bit about the stimulus package. What do we hear, like specifically? What is the thinking about what's happening for small businesses in that package? We just heard a little bit about the volume of it, up to $500 billion. What are they thinking at this point?
Sure. It just occurred to me too, Rob. I didn't mention like why I'm in my car, because I have 3 kids and a dog, and there's just no way to do it in my house. It would be a viral video with the kids on the fan swinging around behind me and stuff like that. So I'm just sparing you guys of that. You got to do what you got to do these days. So just the other day, when we were talking about the possibilities, I told you to expect that with when it comes to federal support, that it'll likely be tied pretty tightly to payroll. So naturally, what's what everybody's worried about is keeping more people on payroll, keeping more people with an income, so that their lives are disrupted in a lesser amount. So the question becomes, how do you handle a distribution? Now, the direct payments are likely, but also what the Senate Republicans, the information they're putting out so far is that they're looking at doing this through the SBA. Now, normally the SBA does loans, but the idea is maybe it would be done as a loan, but if you maintain your payroll, that is a forgiven loan. So that's what they'd put out so far. Some of our members are going to be very familiar with the SBA process and how it works. It is an existing delivery system. Would be, in this case, used a little different way than it's been used in the past. But nevertheless, it wouldn't have to be constructed. In other words, you wouldn't have to go out and invent a new way to put this money and and distributed out into There's several things. Actually, we'll put a link up on the website to the details that the Senate has put out so far. Naturally, it doesn't have all the numbers attached, but you can get a sense from at least the bullet points that the purpose and the distribution system that they're planning on using. But in terms of size and scope and the details, we'll have to wait till next week. Maybe to Congressman Heisinger, it sounds like maybe as early as Monday, something might pass in the Senate. And to the extent that it's far more robust than what we were talking about before, well, these are, I don't think, given what we're seeing, I don't think that you can overdo the economic response, given the fact that we had 80,000 individuals in Michigan in 4 days file for unemployment. And the fact that there were no large companies have to give notice ahead of time. There were no notices on Monday that were filed with the State Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. That means that the majority of those were small businesses that filed that had layoffs of 100 people or fewer. So this gives us a little sense of the extent of it, and so it's welcome news that the response is going to be pretty big.
So Brian, you've sort of switched now to state. Let's stay on that. You predicted yesterday or had heard about an executive order on eviction, a moratorium on evictions. Talk a little about that one.
So the actual order did come out, and we weren't sure at first, is it an eviction order that is only for residences, or does it apply to businesses who are tenants? It is only for residential evictions, and moratorium lasts, let me see, there is a date on it. I think it's just shy of 30 days. Let's see, until April 17th. So April 17th, but it can be extended beyond that. This doesn't prevent rent from accruing. It doesn't forgive any debt or back payment and rent that's due. But the people who carry out evictions are barred from doing so under this under that executive order that came out yesterday.
Okay. And yesterday we actually had Jeff Donofrio, the head of the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, on. I just want to, there's a slide deck. We put it at the top of our web page, or the resource page on our website, and it asks and answers 3 questions. These are the questions we're getting so routinely from our members. Let me just give you what those questions are and then point you to our website. They are: I have a cash flow problem and I need liquidity. I need to cut back hours for my employees, and I need to lay off workers on a temporary basis. Those 3 questions, I want to point you to that for some state level assistance through the Department of Unemployment or Labor and Economic Opportunity and the new UI order from the governor.
So, Rob, if I could add in there, this actually is a really important point. I think we need to drive home this next week to small business owners who either have already laid somebody off or are contemplating laying somebody off. If a person is laid off, that means that they are not eligible for the Family Medical Leave Act reimbursement and in payments. And so now that we know that the IRS is planning next week to provide guidance to business owners about how they can get basically immediate reimbursement for the expenses associated with family medical leave, our business owners might want to consider if it might be more appropriate to do a temporary leave without pay for now, in that so that employee on April 2nd, when this new law that the president just signed goes into effect, for them to be eligible, you might want to have them on leave as opposed to laid off. And so that, let me give you an idea of the financial difference this will make to these. You get $362 a week. That's the highest amount that you can. With the family medical leave, if you for your workers who have kids that are school age, and all of them will qualify for this because all Michigan schools are closed. They can get up to $1,000 on family medical leave. $200 a day is where it caps out at, but it's 2/3 of their pay or $1,000 a week, whichever is lower. That's in many cases that's going to be better than the deal they can get from employment. So, but if you've already laid them off, you can still reclassify them before April 2nd as on leave as opposed to laid off. So this is something, obviously your individual financial situation, you want to talk to your accountant about this, but it would be important to if there's a way that you can deliver a better situation for your employees. I think a lot of our small business owners, their employees are like family, or in some cases they actually are literally family. So so it makes sense to go as far as you can and consider whether or not a reclassification for people that you've had to lay off makes sense.
And some pretty in-depth guidance is on the website in that slide deck from the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. Brian, we've talked around this one a little bit. Governor's under a lot of pressure to do a shelter-in-place order. What is she saying? What are we hearing about this for businesses in Michigan? And talk a little bit about this language about essential versus non-essential businesses.
Yeah, so we're very concerned. Of course, our members are extraordinarily concerned as they see other states like California, New York, and Pennsylvania, Illinois take these shelter at home or put these shelter at home orders in place. And so defining what is essential and what's not essential, it's not that easy. Like some are obvious. They say healthcare is essential, and you got to have people out doing ambulatory services and maybe grocery stores, and do they have to go to all delivery? And but even taking the food industry, there are all kinds of logistical and warehousing operations. There's packaging. There's the actual distribution itself, the food manufacturing, all these different things. We don't have a lot of confidence that a state government has the ability on day one, at least, to determine all of the things in the entire supply chain that are required, exempted, in order to create life-threatening disruptions in some. We are asking for the authorities at the state level, especially to use that as an absolute last resort. And because we're concerned about all of the unknowns and the disruptions, and frankly, just the piece across the landscape. You know, we already saw what happened with closing schools and the impact that had in terms of the reaction people had with in creating shortages of things like toilet paper and so many other things, right? So to the extent that a wider order gets put into place, the ramification will be very, very substantial. So we're hoping it's not just because other states are doing it that it's under consideration. Our governor, as recent as yesterday, said those are just rumors, and there's nothing like that on the table. But there was a bit of a change in language from Thursday to Friday that even the governor was using, and so that suggested that a door that was closed on Thursday was open a crack on Friday. We don't know whether or not that door is opening wider or not, but we are advocating that they think long and hard about some of the unknown ramifications to the disruptions in the economy that can actually hinder the healthcare response that people are so rightly concerned about today.
So thank you, Brian. I mean, we're going to stay not only just watching that, we are that voice, trying to be that voice in the governor's ear that says, there's implications to a total shelter-in-place kind of order. So I also want to point everybody to yesterday. One of our board members, Gina Thorson from Stormy Cromer, put on the SBAM Leadership Council Facebook page an article called 10 Essentials for Leading Well in Tough Times. And I thought it was just so spot on. We're going to hang it onto this broadcast Facebook message and onto Zoom. And I just recommend it to people. A couple of things that you probably already know, but it just really crystallized some ways to think about leading during this tough time. We are going to be back tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Tomorrow, our intent is to sort of recap the week. A lot has happened. I think back to Monday when we informed our staff that we were going to begin to do some work from home and everybody could work remotely, and then we divided into 2 teams and rotating our team. So we're doing those things that we read about as best practice. And so much has happened since Monday. So tomorrow we're going to recap the week a little bit, but we will be back here doing a live briefing once again. Next week, I think we're going to, we'll continue the daily briefings. We're going to turn the corner a little bit while we'll continue to watch what's going on in Washington and the state. I think it's going to stretch out a little bit, slow down a little bit maybe. We'll get some clarity. But we're also going to start to dive into some human resources issues that our members are now asking us about. I think as the dust settles, there are some things you probably haven't even begun to think about yet that are going to come to the surface. We'll bring some experts and we'll continue to monitor things as we go. Hope you have a great weekend, and thanks for listening. Remember to wash your hands.
And don't touch your face. Good luck, everybody.